excited to be here and introduce someone pretty special, pretty amazing. We all love him. He's gonna share his knowledge. He worked for the company for almost 44 years, which is incredible. We all love him. He's amazing. He's incredible. He's show-stopping. I asked him to adopt me. I think he's still thinking about it. Please give it up for Rob Morton!
In case you're wondering, these intros are costing me 20 euros a piece. All right. Well, good morning. You could be here or you could be watching whales because they're popping up everywhere. I guess the WhatsApp group has a couple of hundred sightings on there. We saw some from breakfast this morning, from our room today. It was fantastic. So thank you. I'm going to talk really, really fast today so you can get out and do some more whale watching. So today is we're going to take a walk in the park, and I had shared previously that this is essentially the type of sharing that I would do when we would have our clients come to Disney Institute. And you know, a big part of Disney Institute when we had somebody on site would be to take them and peel back the curtain, a step behind the scenes. We used to call it, I guess we still do, showing them the business behind the magic. And a walk down Main Street could happen during the day, or it could happen before opening, and was usually combined with a step backstage to that little place underneath. Now, you know, clearly I'm not allowed to show you that, but anybody wants to talk about what's really underneath the Magic Kingdom, we can certainly talk about it. It's not as exciting as it sounds. It's a tunnel. Okay. But the idea of when I shared that our goal when we want to provide high levels of guest satisfaction, the intent is that we want to exceed expectations, and you want to do that consistently, not necessarily those big wows. Notice I didn't shout that time, I didn't want to scare anybody. But it's not the big, it's the little things, but you do it consistently. And one of the ways that you can do that is through a relentless attention to detail. And so some of the examples I'm going to share with you today are of that detail. Now, we're going to be in the Magic Kingdom. Many of you are very, very familiar with the Magic Kingdom. I could do a lot of this pretty much in any park with a castle. It could be close to the same tour, but there's, you know, little different examples. And some of what I'm going to share with you today, you have probably, or you may have heard before. I'm pretty confident that you're going to hear some things that you have not heard before, so we'll look forward to that. So at the worst, it's a trip down memory lane, and at the best, you'll get some new stuff, and I think we're going to be able to do both of those. Now, last time when I was talking about Hong Kong Disneyland, and I had given you a picture of that contractor stamp, and it was Elias Disney, and it says 1892. And I went back, here's the actual window from Disneyland, and it's 1895, which makes sense because that's when he started his contracting business in Chicago. And here was that 1892, and it's like, well, what is this? Now, none of his kids were born then. He was already married, and that's not the year his kids were born. Jim down here, he had a good idea of what that was. Is that's when he completed his first house in Chicago. And so, barring any other really good theories, I'm thinking that's pretty good. So he did his research, so give him a round of applause. I'm just amused by the fact that no matter what source, and I've gone to sources at Hong Kong Disneyland, and they go, I don't know. Somebody knows. Yeah, Wikipedia. Yeah, that's sometimes that's the best source, and sometimes it's not. But in this case, I think that was pretty good. So we're going to be primarily at the Magic Kingdom. I'm going to take one little detour today, but we'll do that later. So the front of the Magic Kingdom is the train station. This is what a lot of people would think about arriving at the Magic Kingdom. I am at the Magic Kingdom. I am at Walt Disney World. The I am here moment, that photo of the Mickey floral that you may take that is right in front of the train station. However, in order to provide an experience, we as Disney need to recognize that your experience started a long time before you got here. Now, obviously, there was trip planning and flights and all those things to get here, but even on this day that you arrive, you probably you've taken a bus or a monorail or some other form of transportation from a resort hotel, or you've gotten in a car and you've gone through the auto plaza and you've parked your car and you've gotten on a tram and you've gone to the transportation and ticket center. By the way, it is transportation and ticket center, not ticket and transportation center. Why? Because I worked in transportation and that's the way we said it. Okay. And then you would have taken a monorail or a ferry boat or sometimes trams or other things on really busy days, and then you would get here. And at some point you would have gone through a security checkpoint, and at some point, at some point you may have, had your admission checked more than once in some cases. And the reality is you had a lot of touch points before you got here. And what we tend to believe is that if you're here and you're still thinking about anything that happened to you before you get here, we probably didn't do the best job possible. So early in the morning is probably not the time that you're going to get, magical moments that are extended time. Hopefully you have a positive experience, but we're going to focus on getting you where you want to be as efficiently and as quickly as you possibly can. Now, once you arrive there and you get close up to this, you're going to see the original opening credit of the show that you are about to enter. Walt Disney has 2 windows in the Magic Kingdom. This one is on the train station, so it's the first one that you see. So when you think about credits on movies, this is that first credit that you are going to experience when you arrive there. Now, there's other significance here, and as you visit different Disney parks with a castle around the world, we use steam trains a lot. And we use steam trains, there's a couple of reasons here that the station is where it is and that we've relied on steam trains. One of them has nothing to do with steam trains, is that Walt Disney had this idea that, well, we're entering a stage, so people should walk through a curtain. So he envisioned this red velvet curtain in the front of Disneyland, and they would open up the curtain, and they'd let people in, then they would close the curtain. You know how the curtains work. And enough people convinced him that maybe there were some other options. So the train station is the curtain to take you from this outer lobby through an inner lobby and into the stage for the show. But it has a lot of other significance too. When you think about Walt Disney's personal history with trains, his first job selling candy on the train when it came through Marceline, Missouri when he was a young boy. Later on, after he would return from World War I, where he served in the ambulance corps, and he moved out to California to be with his brother Roy. He had like $40 and an old suitcase, and he got on a train. That's how he was going to get there. A few years later, he had taken a trip to New York City to meet with the distributor, Universal, of Oswald the Lucky Rabbit, only to find out that he had lost the rights to Oswald, and along with the rights to Oswald, most of his animators. And he returned, and he talks about being on that train, returning from New York, and the original concept for Mickey Mouse was born. And as the time when he introduced it to Lillian, he said, "This is our new character, Mortimer." And I think she looked at him like he had 3 heads, and it's like, Mortimer. We have Lillian to thank for Mickey. And legend has it that one of the reasons is, well, you can't help but smile when you say Mickey. So next time you take a picture, just have them say Mickey. Cheese, Mickey works every time. And then later, a little bit later on in his career, he was very stressed out. He was at the studios then, and his doctors basically told him that he needed to get a hobby or he wasn't going to make it. And so the hobby was he built a small gauge railroad at his house. It's the Carrollwood Pacific Railroad. And then folks from the studio and their families would come over on the weekends, and they would all ride this train. But again, it was another connection to his love of trains. He engaged somebody, one of the mechanics by the name of Roger Brogy, whose name is on one of the locomotives at the Magic Kingdom, to build this so he could learn how to do a lot of the work and use the tools and so forth. But he created his own train in his backyard, and that was another one of quite a few different inspirations for Disneyland, in that these people have nothing else better to do than come over here and ride my train. There needs to be more for families to be able to come together and do, and you've probably heard Walt talk about the importance of that. So if you're lucky, you get this, that's going to be me waving someday. You're going to get that train, nothing like the steam train, early upon your arrival, and the whistle blowing and so forth, and it takes you back in time, which is one of the goals that we're trying to do. Now, right before this, you've gone through and you've scanned your Magic Band and your ticket, and in the front of each of our parks now, it's very different than a lot of other amusement parks, because there is no there's no turnstiles anymore, and turnstiles were viewed as a barrier, and I think we were the first that I know of to remove them. Now there's some others that have done it as technology evolves and allows that entrance. But what we have here at the front of the park is you're going to interact with a park greeter. Now, when I was working there initially, these individuals, the job description was ticket taker. Ticket taker implies the transaction of, I'm going to take your ticket and I'm going to do something with your ticket and I'm going to return your ticket. And there was no emotional connection involved in that. So in the mid-1990s, we did a lot of work to evolve. That's when the ticket sellers became vacation planners, for example. And we worked with Gallup organization for a good period of time to help identify what were some of the talents and personality traits that were best suited for specific roles. But in this case, we were looking for somebody who would greet and welcome, and oh, by the way, they process your admission. But the primary goal of these individuals is to greet and welcome. And you'll notice the two folks with the gold shirts, those are the greeters. They are facing outward. Very important that the greeter should be there to welcome people as they arrive. Probably, I'm trying to think, a couple of years, or a year or so before I retired, I had the chance to go, and I did a morning walk with the vice president at that time, Melissa Valaket. And it was so wonderful to hear her talk, and she had certain priorities herself that she would always reinforce when she was out in the park. And one of them, and it was so beautifully simple, and it was, greeters should greet. You know, you don't want somebody that's in a greeter position hiding behind something or avoiding contact. They should be there. So this idea of being out front, being there to welcome people when they exit the monorail or the ferry boat, and that's the type of experience that we want people to have right at the beginning. Right behind them, you will always see a team of folks from guest relations, because as much as we love new technology, there is nothing perfect about new technology. So sometimes there are challenges. These individuals, because the greeter will raise their hand, and immediately somebody will see it, they'll come over, and then they will take the guests aside, they'll solve the problem, and then the greeter can continue to greet and get people into the park. We want you in front of that train station. We want you ready to start your experience as seamlessly and as quickly as possible. We want the experience to be pleasant, hopefully not long lasting, but very pleasant. And then as soon as you arrive and you have that emotional, we're here, guests tend to start remembering the things that they're going to need to have in order to have the experience that they want to have. So for example, they may need wheelchairs or strollers or something to help them maneuver around the park. And we're going to have that obviously at the front of the park, but there's a little known concept that helps determine, well, where are we going to put these things? And it is human nature that if you are given the option, oh, there we go, going left or going right, which way are you going to go? Why? Right. It's actually more influenced by the side of the street that people drive on in the place that you are. So with the overwhelming number of people that come to the to Walt Disney World or Disneyland will drive on the right-hand side of the road, so that influences it more than right-handedness, left-handedness, and because that feeds into how you orient yourself with your surroundings, and which is very interesting because in the U.S. and in France, for example, everything is oriented to the right. In Japan, everything's oriented to the left, and in Hong Kong, it's all messed up because you've got folks from mainland, basically half of their guests come from mainland China where they drive on the right, and the rest come from like Southeast Asia, former colonial countries that drive on the left-hand side. So sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't. But you can watch, if you ever want to have some fun, if you're in a U.S. park or in Paris, just go somewhere where people have to make a decision to go this way or this way. And unless a brand new attraction just opened that's changing this, just count. See how many people go one way versus the other. It'll probably be 70-30, maybe 80-20. Just human nature that would drive that. But we can use it. So not only would we have things like you may have locker rental in addition to the strollers and so forth. What is it that people need to be able to begin their day? Other things that they may need are like sundry items, hats, sunscreen, sunglasses, those things that you would have most likely left in your hotel room or in your car that you don't want to go back to get. And those are going to be available right there at the entrance. We have, before smartphones and that type of digital photograph technology, the next thing we needed to have was a place for film, memory cards, and those types of things for your to capture your photos, and then generally a grab-and-go options for food. This is not the time of day that you're going to probably sit down unless you've been a million times and you're going to a breakfast. That's one thing. But for most people, they're going in and they're going to be looking for the Starbucks or the confectionery or something where they can grab and go and continue on to get to their first destination. At the end of the day, this plays just as well, because as you are leaving the park, on the right-hand side are going to be things like the main restrooms in Town Square before you exit, the City Hall, the guest relations location, the opportunity for you to share stories about what you liked, and maybe if you had a challenge, we can fix it then instead of waiting till you get home and post about it 400 times. And so those are, and also the big merchandise locations. The Emporium, in its massive state, is on the right-hand side as you exit. That's for a reason, because like 80% of our merchandise sales are in the last 2 hours of the day. That won't surprise anybody, but you're going to put it in the place that people are most likely to be. So you're out here, you're going to go in underneath the train station. You're going to see this sign, which is foreshadowing the experience that you are going to have. Here you leave today and enter the world of yesterday, tomorrow, and fantasy. You're going to Main Street. You're going to Tomorrowland. You're going to Fantasyland. And there's some iterations of this a little bit in different parks around the world, but it is that, okay, here we go, the show's getting ready to begin. We are going to now transition from the outer lobby to like the inner lobby. So think about going to a theater, and once you get in and you process your ticket, and you're probably there's concessions, but what else are you going to see there? You're going to start to see the coming attractions. So as you enter in, there's going to be coming attractions on both sides. I'll show you a couple of those. This tunnel that goes underneath here. Now, I don't know if the Imagineers intentionally did this exactly, but what this does, I learned this. One of the clients that I got to work with that was fascinating was Boeing. And I worked with them at a time where they were getting ready to launch their new aircraft at the time, which was the 787 Dreamliner. They knew that the design of the Dreamliner was going to be a game changer for a lot of reasons. This is not a Boeing commercial. But one of the things that they did architecturally is that when you entered on the second door on the left, they had where the plane opens up. So instead of just coming in and continuing to be from the jetway, and then you get in the plane and you still feel like this, it intentionally opened up and it gave you a feeling of release. So they called that concept compression and release, and that's exactly what you walk through. You'll feel compressed for a moment, and then you will, we are inside the park. So you do have the coming attractions, the most important things that you might want to see, depending on your interests. They are vintage looking, and so therefore it's kind of an old school. But hey, you're in 1900. What do you expect? Pirates of the Caribbean. That's me, by the way, if you remember that poster from the other day. Also in tunnel, you would find guide maps in multiple languages. It is surprising to me how many people still want guide maps. I guess that really surprised me, but we tried to get them on our last trip to Asia, and we had to go ask for them, and they were, I think, in a box under a counter somewhere that somebody had to get on their hands and knees to find. But hey, we got them. And I remember there were days that I had mentioned we would come out and we did what we would call cross utilization. So those of us who weren't working in the park would come out and help out. I talked about how I will never be the best at parking strollers at the Magic Kingdom. I was great, or Pirates of the Caribbean rather. I was great with a pan and broom. And one of the things that I did love is I was in charge of replenishing these. 7 hours, no break, never stopped. That's how many people still want it, and that was just a few years ago. And I'm sure it's less now, but it's so important. And I don't know, this has just been a classic, but it also is so helpful because you have multiple languages. We certainly know where our guests come from and what languages are most likely to be required when they arrive, so we have those available. So you go through that tunnel, you pass the guide map rack, and then you enter the park. So my question to you, raise your hand, I'll call on a few of you. What is the theme of Main Street USA? The theme. Nostalgia, okay. Good, what else? Okay, Walt in his hometown, I'll talk more about that in a minute. Retail. That's just funny. I love that. All right. Okay, this idea of a simpler time and hearkening back to that. Take one more. Nostalgia. All right. The theme of Main Street USA. Now the setting, clearly, it's around it's the turn of the century. The theme of Main Street USA, optimism. And if you think back to that time period, it was the time of the American Revolution, Industrial Revolution. A lot of prosperity and hope and looking forward to all of these exciting things that were going to happen. And it did harken back to the time of Walt Disney, going back to his hometown of Marceline, Missouri. If you have not been there and you can make the trip, it's not conveniently located. However, it is worth it. It is the Boyhood Museum there. It was started by Walt Disney's, the collection of his little sister Ruth. And they collected all of these things, and there's a whole other story about that. But they filled 2 stories of the train station in Marceline for that museum. It is absolutely fantastic. Little known fact, a lot of Main Street, though, was influenced more by the memories of the architect Harper Goff, who grew up in Fort Collins, Colorado. Now you go to Fort Collins and they're not owning it, because you really got to work to find somebody who will give you something that says, well, these places might have, and you can see the connection. But that type of hometown feel, there's similarity, and you can certainly connect it to the inspiration to happen. So now you've gone from the outside to the inside. You're in Town Square, and what has changed from the outside to the inside? Yes. You see the castle, so there's an icon that is there. What else has changed? Music has changed, yes. What else? Smells have changed. What are you smelling? Whatever they're cooking. What are the most common smells associated with that time period? Popcorn, baked goods. There's actually one other that's top of the list. What? More specific. Gosh, yes. Horseman. So you get in, the architecture changes, the music changes. Most of the music was either from the time period or there's a lot of time Broadway music from Broadway productions that the setting of the Broadway show was from that time period. Hello Dolly, Oklahoma, and the tempo of these songs is such that you sometimes just kind of see people going to the beat of the music walking down Main Street, USA, and you're there and you're in another time period, but being in another time period presents a challenge. And I'm going to show you some sidewalk pictures here. They're going to be very, very nice. But I want to introduce you to a concept called storybook realism. Storybook realism is this idea of being able to put you into another time and place while recognizing that your frame of reference is modern day. So we want you to get it, we want it to feel like it, but we know that you're going to interact with it with the way that you interact with your daily life. So as you walk initially from into the park and you go onto the street in Town Square, there's no curb line that is in the flow of traffic. You just walk straight in, because having a curb here, what are you looking at? You're looking at the castle. You're looking at everything else, especially if you're there for the first time. So you are less likely to be looking where you should be looking. You're looking up here. So that wouldn't be the case in 1900. We would not have ramps for wheelchairs and strollers and for accessibility in that time period. And so we wouldn't have probably all of the railings around to protect you from accessing the landscaping or anything else that we may not want you to access. That would be different. And so this idea of storybook realism gives you that feeling, but allows you to interact with it safely and say on your own terms, right? We also use this environment, and this is the really the first example that I'm what? Okay. Don't worry, I can talk more at higher volume. So this red concrete is very popular. We don't have red concrete in our parks because we got a good deal on red concrete. And it's not because of how it absorbs the heat or not, or that it's easy to clean or anything like that. The reality is that the color red is the opposite of green on the color wheel, and therefore it makes the landscaping look better in photographs. Who knew? So again, now over time, depending on where you are, there's some walkways that are themed, or we've put in wagon tracks or animal prints or all of those kinds of things. So there's a mixture, but this idea, when you see a lot of red concrete, it's not by chance. This is an opportunity based on research from Kodak and from others that study these types of things, and said, okay, your best option right now is to use this because it'll make the photographs look better. And I don't know what the statistic is today, but for years and years and years, it's like 5% of every picture developed on Kodak film was of a Disney park, which that sounds like a lot to me. All right, so once you're Town Square, you look around, and on one side you have City Hall, and City Hall, some of the buildings here, and this is one of them, are going to be full-size buildings or large buildings, and it's going to serve a couple of purposes. They may be large because they're going to get a lot of traffic, but they could be large because they're blocking things that we don't want you to see. And so in Town Square, there's not a lot behind us. We're going to make sure that we block out, and it's like the camera only needs to see what the camera needs to see, and in this case, your eyes are the camera, so we're gonna protect that. On the opposite side is this is gone. It was a hospitality center. It's now the Town Square Theater. It was the original home of the Walt Disney Story. It was then the home of the Epcot Center Preview Center. Was there. Now it's meet and greet with Disney characters. So, but the design of the building, while looking like a big town hall or that type of thing for that time period, is to block your view. City Hall, you're blocking the view of Adventureland. On this side, you're blocking the view of Tomorrowland and a parking lot. Looking down Main Street, USA, you start to see impacts of architecture that are intended to trick your eyes. In this case, there are two artistic techniques at play. One of them is forced perspective, and we'll look a little bit closer at that. But it is making things look larger than what they are by shrinking their size as you go from the bottom to the top. So something that will look like 4 stories is only 3 stories or 2 stories because of the way that it's designed. But your eye is going to rationalize, oh, that's a X number of story building. It also uses the vanishing point. And the vanishing point, as you go down the street, the awnings actually move out closer and closer to the curb line. And if you've ever drawn like a fence line or drawn a road in art class, and it starts like this, and then it gets narrower and narrower and narrower as it gets to the end. And what that does is it makes the castle look further away than what it really is. And actually larger, keeping in mind the forced perspective that's used in the castle. So there's a little trick here. Now, at the end of the night, you'll be pleased to know, we don't do this to you because that vanishing point doesn't exist. And the train station that is at the front of the park that is now the exit is a full-size building, functional, both floors. It actually makes the exit look closer than what it really is. It is an optical illusion for your feet. You are welcome. One of the other centerpieces here of Town Square is the American flag that we have. And some of you have been, and you may know this fact, there's a lot of things that look like American flags up and down the street, but there's only one American flag. These are pennants. They have been altered in some way, number of stars, stripes, something that ensure that we don't have to raise and lower them every day or put lights on them. It's all of that. So they are for decoration. There is one American flag here. It may also surprise you to know that for quite a few years after we opened, if there had been a proclamation, something had happened, and the president said we are going to lower our flags to half-mast, we didn't do it. And the reason that we didn't do it for a period of time is we did not want you to come to Disney and have the reminder of a real-world tragedy right in your face. So there was logic there. However, our guests shared their opinion on this. And over time, they influenced a change in the policy. And in fact, that I understand led to that was the Marine barracks bombing in Beirut. I think that's like 1982. And one of the first times, if not the first time, that we lowered our flags to half-mast was after the Space Shuttle Challenger. And our guests were telling, okay, we get this whole reality fantasy thing, but if the nation's a mourning, we should be a mourning. And they're right, and we agreed. But ironically, this idea of we want to protect people from what's happening in the real world that day in January in 1986, there were people gathered around this flag in Town Square and watched the space shuttle explode in the sky. It was right there. I mean, just right there. And so no matter how hard you try, you're not going to do that. And I was so glad that that was a moment in time that we did it, and we have done it ever since. But for a little bit of time, we were working very hard to protect people from the outside world and reminding them that something terrible had happened, and something that where the nation was in mourning. Now, we're going to shift gears a little bit. For the next 30 minutes, we're going to talk about trash cans. You've probably heard a lot about trash cans. All right, I won't make it that long because I'll end up running out of time here. But as you walk into any of our parks, you see the trash cans. The trash cans are there, obviously, to collect trash. But it goes back to Disneyland, because one of the things that Walt wanted to do was to be different than every other amusement park. And amusement parks have the stereotype of being dirty, so what are we going to do? We're going to have people to help keep it clean, but we also need our guests to help keep it clean, so we need trash cans. At that moment in time, the only trash cans that are available were these wire baskets like you would see at a national park or something. The problem with that is you can see it, you can smell it, and when the wind blows, it blows around and makes a mess. The design of the trash cans that we have today was from a vendor, a manufacturer in California, that came up with that design of the flaps where you could hide everything that was on the inside, and that has become the industry standard since then. Started at Disneyland. And we needed to think, okay, so great, we've got the design down, except, now we can make them look different in every single part of the park, so that's a lot of fun. Well, we need to figure out how many we needed, and there's stories about handing out pieces of candy to guests at Disneyland and to see how far they would go before the wrapper would either hit the ground or go in their pocket. So right now, as you walk around our parks, every 27 steps or so, there's going to be a trash can. You don't believe me? Try it. Start walking, start counting. Now, does that mean every 27? No. On average, that's about what you'll probably find. On Main Street, they're a lot closer together because everybody's coming in and out that way. Other places, they may be further apart. Every trash can has a home, a specific place on the sidewalk, lined up. That's where it stays. All day long, there are people that will go up and down the street straightening trash cans. I know, I did it. I was good at it too. I was the best there ever was. Okay, but the idea is the trash cans, if you keep them organized and aligned, you walk down the street and you don't notice them unless you need one, in which case, at that moment, there's one right in front of you. Same thing goes for strollers. Why do we work so hard to keep strollers organized? If we keep them organized, you don't see them. They don't impact your visit. If we don't keep them organized, it has a tremendous impact on that. So these trash cans are really a significant part of the experience because the cleanliness of our parks is so important to our guests. As we look over on the side of Town Square, the gates, you also see the landscape, the trees that are built. That also serves to block line of sight, so you don't see things that we don't want you to see. And then here you look up and you have the forced perspective. So you're at like a 90% versus real size, maybe 60%, 30%. But it looks at a glance like on a photograph like a 3-story building. It is a 2-story building. So that is an up close look at that. I'm going to go back once. You'll notice here that we have the door open, and if you walk down any of our on Main Street or anywhere else, all of our doors are always open no matter what the weather is. Okay, I guess if it's blowing rain, they may close the door. But we know that if our doors are open, it's going to be more welcoming. And if it's more welcoming, you're more likely to come inside. And if you're more likely to come inside, you're more likely to interact with us. And if you interact with us, you're more likely to... The windows along Main Street are designed to be lower down than would be historically accurate because we want children to be able to see in, or maybe guests that happen to be using a wheelchair. If we didn't do this, then the reality is that a lot of what you're seeing is the person's rear end that you're following, which is not magical. So, but again, lower windows give people things to look at. Does that influence sales later? Yeah, perhaps. You know, one of the things I always said, you know, little children do not generally make purchase decisions, but they sure as heck influence purchase decisions. I'd like to point out a few of my favorite windows. The windows on Main Street, when you see them, the companies are fictitious, the names are real, the person's name. This is recognition for people who've made significant contributions, and no, I do not have a window on Main Street. But this is one of my favorites because of the connections that it makes. This is the Buena Vista Magic Lantern Slide Companies. Treat your friends to our special tricks. First name on there, Yo Gracie. Yo Gracie was original Imagineer. One of the things that he is most known for are the special effects and the ghosts at the Haunted Mansion. Again, if you're interested in how those are made, look up Pepper's Ghost. Have a good time with that. Make your own. But the story doesn't stop there, because when you're waiting in the queue for the Haunted Mansion, you're going to pass this. And Master Gracie, the master of Gracie Manor, the name of the Haunted Mansion. Another one example that I just love is right above the cinema, and it's Sawyer Fence Painting, Tom Nabby proprietor. And Tom Nabby was unique in that he worked for Disney. He had 48 years of service, but retired when he was like 57 years old. Something like that. Yeah, I may have those numbers slightly off, but you get the idea. He was hired by Walt as a child, originally to be like the newspaper boy, but very quickly became the original Tom Sawyer at Disneyland, and has gone on to become a Disney legend in many ways. He has written a book about it, and but at Walt Disney World, he is known for something else. You will see people walking around with these little grabbers. These grabbers were first developed, or the concept was, when Tom Nabby was at the monorail, in the monorail operation, people kept dropping things down in the trough. Okay, there's stuff in there that you don't want to get too close to, called electricity. And so they needed to create something that could reach in and pull people's cameras or wallets or anything else that they'd done. And they created a grabber, and it became known as a Nabby grabber. And if you see people walking around with these today at Disney, at any of our parks in Florida, they will be referred to as Nabby grabbers, named after Tom Nabby. A great guy. Talk about somebody who has a lot of stories. Knew Walt personally, and quite often he will be in. He'll put out on Facebook or something that he's going to be at the Magic Kingdom, and he stands in front of his window and greets people as they come across. He has written a book. It's called Walt Hired Me. Just came out in hardback. You can actually get a signed copy now if you would like to. He was also one of the guys that when we did the culture change known as performance excellence, and it says shifting from a management style to a leadership style, he was one that had fully embraced the management style. You know, he was tough to work for, but he was connected to Walt. He was doing it for all the right reasons. But when things shifted and the behaviors of leaders became a key driver of how we're going to be successful, he is one that embraced it, changed, and became who he really was. And it was a wonderful success story until he retired. Again, we have one of these, casting agency like we do everywhere else. Just a couple more. This is for Charlie Ridgway, who was our publicist for many, many years. Before he passed away, he wrote a book called Spinning Disney's World. That can be fun. And I wanted to come back. My favorite Charlie Ridgway story. He was famous. He was going to get any shot he wanted to. And one day, we needed to have this shot done. 50th birthday for Donald Duck. By the way, right back here, third person from the right, in a maroon members-only jacket. That is me. I was there that day, and these ducks didn't want any part of it. They made a cake a birthday cake out of corn and thought that the ducks would go nuts for it. They didn't want it. And then Charlie thought, well, wouldn't it be fun if these ducks with their name tags and their hats went swimming in the Swanboat Canal? Another gentleman by the name of Charlie from Discovery Island, who was in charge of the ducks, said no, they've never been in water before. But it would make a great shot. So Charlie Ridgway gets the ducks and they get in the water, and you can imagine the fun of getting the ducks back out of the water required Charlie from Discovery Island to jump into the canal and swim around and get these ducks out with guests on both bridges watching all of this. Finally got the ducks out, and then Charlie swam over to get out. Charlie Ridgway goes to pick them up, and then Charlie Cook did one of these. He did not succeed. I think they got a foot in the water, but man, that would have been funny. All right. I showed you this on an early, on my very first presentation. The subsidiaries, all of the different corporations that were created for the land acquisition. Up above that one, on a very tall building, is a window that honors Frank Wells, who was our Chief Operating Officer and President for about 10 years, joined with Michael Eisner. His passion in life was mountain climbing, and he had climbed 6 of the 7 summits. Only Everest eluded him, but this is our way of giving him credit for that. And he actually passed away doing extreme skiing out in the western U.S. It was a helicopter accident, so that was a big loss. We have here, this is Lee Cockrell, who was our Chief Operating Officer for, that wasn't his official title, but functionally that's what he was, Executive Vice President for Operations. Came from Marriott, was involved in opening Euro Disney in Paris, and really had a lot of influence on leadership style and what do leaders need to do to be successful. He would tell a story about how we needed to embrace change. We needed to look at things differently and not only do things the way that we'd always done them. And he told a story how he loves Tabasco sauce. Puts Tabasco sauce on everything. And one time he was mad because his wife bought him a bottle of green Tabasco sauce instead of red Tabasco sauce. Until she made him try it, and then he realized he liked it better. And so one of the things that he did was, if he thought that you had creative potential and that you were thinking outside of the box and those types of things, if you were lucky, you would be honored by receiving a bottle of green Tabasco sauce. And the first time I met him, we were presenting, I was in guest relations at the time, and we had all of these grand ideas. We were going to like have a call center where the cast members could hang out on beanbags and so forth. Because you realize in guest relations that you've got a lot of very outgoing, extroverted people. These are absolutely the best people to be answering the questions that we're getting on the phone, and the last people in the world to ever do it on a telephone. Trying to get them to sit still to do anything. So we had all these ideas, and I'm thinking, okay, I got this. I'm getting a bottle. And then I got a note from him saying, well, you have the potential to get one. And some years later, I met with him and his co-writer and his agent for his first book called Creating Magic, and I told him that story, and a few days later I got my bottle of green Tabasco sauce. So that was so much fun. But that first book, Creating Magic, and if you have it at home, or if you ever read it, look at the acknowledgments, and if you dig deep enough, you'll find my name in there, which is really cool. This one's always kind of funny. The original Dick Nunes Dick Nunes was our chairman before he retired, and then Ron Miller, it was Walt Disney's son-in-law, is the night manager. I think that's kind of funny because he had a brief stint as our chief executive that did not go well, and he was, you don't fire anybody at Disney, you invite them to find their happiness somewhere else. So he did. He went and opened the Silverado Winery, so it was all good. There is the Starbucks on Main Street. We had to make some changes to this. We couldn't have the current logo because 1900s. We couldn't have the original logo because, well, you can look it up. We had to make some alterations to the original logo to make it family friendly. So we did that. So we have a unique logo in our parks where we are using a vintage logo. Again, we had to pay attention to that. Couldn't have it current. And then here's the other Walt Disney window, faces the castle, the only window that faces Cinderella Castle. So opening credit at the at the train station, closing credit above the ice cream parlor facing the castle. I'm going to take a quick trip over there because I can do the same kind of tour in Disneyland on Main Street. And one of the first times I was there, it was probably Bruce Kimbrell that showed me this, for those who know him. Showed me one example that I just think is too cute, and I had a picture of it, so I'm going to go across the coast for just a minute. This is their Coke corner. You get hot dogs, Coca-Cola. You'll notice the red and white light bulbs. Well, they kind of realized as they were going around that they didn't have the right number where they could go red, white, red, white, red, white, and at one point in time they had to do this. So if you were ever there, you too can take a picture of it. Up at let's see, give me just a second here. I'm going to jump over to Liberty Square for a moment. If you go into Liberty Square and you look at a building, now we're talking 1700s, right? Colonial America. And if you look at the shutters on the buildings, it looks like, somebody wasn't getting enough sleep or somebody was influenced by something, but all the shutters are crooked. The reason the shutters are crooked is because during the American Revolution, we needed metal for the war effort and for ammunition and so forth. And so people would donate their metal, and they replaced the metal hinges with leather. And then the leather would mean that the shutters were going to be crooked. And I always loved that example. Here's another one. Y'all know where I'm heading with this one? Yeah, so rumor has it that this path that goes through the red sidewalk all through Liberty Square is not directing you to Big Thunder Mountain or Tiana's Bayou Adventure. It represents that during colonial times, plumbing was very different. And okay, it's the sewer. It runs down the middle of the street. It's historically accurate. Now, some people would argue, well, that's not what really it was, because it used to be a little cobblestone path in the middle, and I don't know. It's in the official Walt Disney World Tour Guide narration, so I'm going with it. Never let the facts get in the way of a good story. Liberty Square, the Liberty Tree in front of the Hall of Presidents. When you go there, the Liberty Tree signifies these locations that existed where people could come and they could freely share their views without any threat of repercussion or anything. And so there was Liberty Trees in communities across colonial America. And here, if you go and you pay very close attention and you count, there's going to be 13 lanterns in the Liberty Tree next to a replica of the Liberty Bell that was cast from the original mold of the Liberty Bell. And when we had the Youth Education Series programs there, we had a program on American history. It started with taking them on stage to talk about the historical representation of the Hall of Presidents and the costuming and all of that, but in the end of the day with them reciting the preamble to the Constitution and ringing the Liberty Bell in Liberty Square. So imagine how special it would be to be a school student and you got to do that. And then here's I'm kind of going to go back to what I shared with you last time, where I talked about when we make decisions, we want to understand the impact that the decision has on our cast, our guests, and our business. And during a period of difficult times, we were challenged to save money any way that we can. We really don't want to impact the guest experience. Let's just be as frugal as we possibly can. And one of the ideas that they came up with, this is a checkerboard that's located, it was located next to the recently closed shooting gallery. By the way, when the shooting gallery the original shooting gallery, they had real pellets, metal targets, and every night had to repaint the targets because the metal pellets were chipping the paint on the targets. Then they changed to infrared or whatever they're using today. But so, as you can imagine, a lot. Constantly had to, because people would take them as souvenirs and so forth, which is fine. But over time, there's a significant cost associated with that. And the manager was ready to go and remove this so they would not do that. And we're talking, probably thousands of dollars a year in checker pieces, because they're kind of unique. They're little, pieces of cut wood. Before he made that decision, he walked over and stood and watched a grandfather teaching his grandson to play checkers for the first time. Suffice to say, the checkerboard remained, because that was worth way more than any amount of money. You think, oh well, nobody will notice it. Yeah, but we would have missed out on that, and we just can't have it. All right. So I've successfully used all of my time. So next time on Friday, 2 days off for Rob. Okay. We're going to go in and get a current personal perspective on our international parks. This is going to be kind of travelogish. But if you are interested in our international parks, the dates here, this is the last time that we visited, and then we'll update Disneyland Paris next week. But we're going to share things about, where they're located and the proximity to other things, hotels, and some of our favorite experiences and attractions. And again, if you've been there and want a memory flashback, great. If you're interested in someday going, please be here for that, and we'll dive through, see if I can get through in an hour. Other than that, I have 7 seconds left. 5, 4. Have a great rest of the day. Thank you so much for being here.